When starting your own business, you don't want to leave any stones unturned, especially when it comes to branding your product. Branding is the identity of a product, and when we think about a brand, a large company probably comes to mind, right? But small startup companies still need to focus on branding as well as the road to success. So joining us now with some brand building strategies is the author of You Can Still Win, and he's a small business expert as well. Andre Taylor joins us now with some interesting insights on how branding can factor into your small business. Thanks for joining us, Andre.
Good morning to you, Mike.
All right, let's begin with what branding is all about. What is the importance of branding, especially when you're talking about a smaller company?
Well, Mike, branding is really important because it is the personality of a company. And a lot of times when we start firms and small companies, we don't think a lot about the personality that we want to develop. A lot of times that transfers just from the owner, but we should actually think about that in a more strategic way and plan that process and move it forward in a deliberate way.
So branding is basically the personality of a product or service.
It is.
Okay, let's talk about how important this is when you're talking about a small startup. How big of a role can branding play when you're trying to target an audience?
Well, one of the things that a brand does effectively is it tells your customer what they can expect. And it makes a customer say, listen, I know if I go there, I'm going to get a service of a certain level, of a certain quality, of a certain reliability. So it's important to think of brands in that context and actually map out specific things you're going to do that customers can count on.
Give us some examples of what you're talking about.
Well, one example, of course, is if you might look at Starbucks, for example. It started as a small company. It has turned into a rather large company. But we know when we go to Starbucks, we're going to get a certain quality of coffee. We're going to get a space where we can sit down and talk with friends or maybe even conduct business. In fact, they even refer to it internally as the third place. It's an example of someone taking their brand forward and thinking that through and then rolling it out in a big way.
But what about if you're just a small mom and pop coffee shop, or maybe you're a laundromat or something like that? How do you avoid the risk of becoming too cliche or overstating what you really do? Saying, for instance, you're the best coffee in the world, or in that sort of reign. I mean, how do you really find the right branding for what you do when you're right at the beginning?
Well, when we're talking about slogans and taglines and those sorts of things, it's always important that we back that up and we have a way of quantifying that. But I think that if you are a person who is really passionate about your business, committed to your customers, and you can display that in some way, in some fashion, in the way you treat them, I think you're in the right path there.
All right, well, let's talk about maybe if you're not a company, what about just personally? I mean, so many people are looking for jobs these days, and whether they're a consultant or a lawyer, can you use branding to brand yourself?
Mike, there's no question. In fact, I would say that branding is particularly important for individuals pursuing their career, moving forward out there in the job market, because there are so many people out there looking for jobs. There's so many people that have comparable education. The key is you have to distinguish yourself and differentiate yourself from all those that are out there. And you can do that by the kinds of projects you've worked on, your point of view. You can do that in your style, in your attitude. There are lots of ways we can differentiate ourselves, but very often we sort of do the same thing that everyone else does.
Good advice, Andre Taylor. We only have about 20 seconds left. In about 10 seconds, can you rattle off some questions that you need to consider?
Well, you need to think about, who am I? How am I going to deliver this? How am I going to deliver it consistently? You want to think about how can I step up what I'm doing in a way so that it separates me from others? What kind of feeling do I want my customers to have? These are examples of some of the kinds of questions you should be thinking about. Even thinking about words that you want your customers to associate with you are important in terms of branding.
All right, Andre Taylor, author of You Can Still Win and a small business expert. Thanks for sharing your insight with us.
Thank you, Mike.